Shedeur Sanders just broke the unspoken code, calling out his own teammates as frauds. Stephen A. went ballistic, but was this leadership or betrayal?
What I'm saying is, rather than ask that question about the inordinate amount of talent those guys have, how about asking the question, it's deeper than me that it's in the 5th round? Because he's not a 5th round. That is a precipitous drop. And so when I use, you remember when I said collusion, I said they don't have to collude. It's a universal understanding. They understand one another. They don't have to conspire with one another. They know how they think. It's about control. It's their product. And if Deion Sanders, and again, I'm not blaming him for it, I'm talking about the kind of excuses, the kind of mentality, and I'm going to prove it to you in 1 second. In terms of him saying what he said and them wanting to send a message, nah, we ain't having that. This is our league. Do you remember the news that they were complaining about the $5 million that they missed out on per team, and they blamed Colin Kaepernick for that? Remember that? Yeah. They said, yo, they got a check, Molly, for $246 million a piece, and were complaining privately about the $5 million they missed out on. This is how they think. And so to me, him falling to the 5th round, it's like you're sending a message.
You know what happens when a Sanders throws shade? The entire football universe stops and listens. But when Shedeur Sanders, yeah, Deion's boy, decides to air out dirty laundry about his own team's leadership, we're not just talking about your typical locker room gossip anymore. We're talking about a straight-up declaration of war. And Stephen A. Smith? Man caught wind of this story and lost his absolute mind on live television. I'm talking about the kind of rant that breaks the internet, gets trending hashtags, and has grown men arguing in grocery store checkout lines. But here's the kicker. What Shedeur said wasn't just some heat-of-the-moment outburst. This was calculated, deliberate, and it's about to change everything you thought you knew about team dynamics in college football. Now, before we dive into this absolute chaos, let me paint you a picture of what we're dealing with here. Shedeur Sanders isn't just any quarterback. He's football royalty, the son of Coach Prime himself, the man who transformed Jackson State into a powerhouse and then took his talents to Colorado. This is a kid who grew up watching his father dominate at the highest level, who learned the game from arguably one of the most charismatic and confident athletes in sports history. So when Shedeur speaks, it carries weight, it carries legacy, and it carries consequences.
The leadership that Deion has, Prime has, and we all know him, but now Shedeur has to be that man and maybe, step out a little bit, come from underneath the wing and become the man, because this is a performance-based league. If Shedeur goes out there and balls out, he's going to be a starter on the team, and I would bet that he's going to be a starter on the team. Maybe not to start the season, but for the end of the 25 season, Shedeur is going to be leading the team this season.
Yeah, no, I believe that too, but now and this is just my opinion, it's time for Deion to let go a little bit, right? It's time for, if you're saying this about Shedeur, you get to say that now because I'm not his coach anymore. If Shedeur is dealing with this certain level of adversity, yeah, I'm on the phone with him. Yeah, I'm in his room and we're having conversations. But when he goes to work, he has to go to work as a man, right? Shedeur Sanders is going to be leading dudes that were like you in the league, that were like you, that were like me. At the time, you had kids and were married. I had kids and was married. Chan, you was a grown man that said, I could go in the streets every night and I could come in here and work. If I'm thinking that you're not running your life or you're not running your career, don't come sit in front of my locker.
But here's where things get interesting. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this part. For months, there have been whispers, quiet conversations in training facilities, hushed discussions between reporters, coded language in post-game interviews. The kind of talk that makes you lean in closer, that makes your ears perk up when you hear it. Something wasn't right in Colorado. Something was brewing beneath the surface of all those highlight reels and primetime games. You see, when Coach Prime brought his brand of football to Boulder, he didn't just bring a new coaching philosophy. He brought a complete cultural overhaul. New players, new expectations, new standards. And with that kind of massive change comes friction. It's inevitable. But nobody expected the friction to come from within the Sanders family circle itself. What exactly did Shedeur say? That has everybody losing their minds? Well, buckle up, because this is where it gets spicy. During what was supposed to be a routine media availability session, Shedeur was asked about team chemistry and leadership dynamics. Standard question, right? The kind of softball that usually gets answered with generic coach speak about working together and staying focused. But not this time. Oh no, not this time.
Sanders, Shedeur said the vibe in the QB room is positive. Everybody's cool. Outside the room, people try to pit us against each other, but inside the room, we know we're one. We're all different characters. It's funny going in there seeing Joe every day. It's fun to see him because I like, wow, I really mean Joe Flacco right now, we're on the same team. Then of course, Kenny, the experience he's been in the league with these two is cool. And to see the process of it. And Deshaun, of course, he's active in there and he's all in the meeting, so it's cool talking to him. Why? So, yes, only one quarterback can play. We understand that. Mm-hmm. So, because only one quarterback, this isn't Hunger Games. I think that, people think, I think sometimes, Ocho, people try to fit like it's a Hunger Games. Like you could have only one winner. Yes, there's only going to be one guy that's going to be able to play at a time. But I'm not trying to sabotage it. I'm going to go in there. Hopefully he can impart some wisdom. Joe Flacco's been in this thing a very, very long time. What is this, year 17, 18 for Joe?
Super Bowl winning quarterback at
Yeah. Got to be at least 17. I think 2009 was his rookie year.
Shedeur looked dead into those cameras and said something that nobody saw coming. He called out what he described as fake leadership within the team. Not just any leadership. He was talking about guys who were supposed to be setting the tone, supposed to be the veterans showing the way. He talked about players who talk a big game in front of the media, but don't back it up when the lights go down and the real work begins. But here's the part that really sent shockwaves. He didn't stop there. Shedeur went on to describe a culture where some players were more concerned with their personal brands, their social media presence, and their individual stats than they were about winning games. He talked about meetings where guys would nod their heads and agree to the game plan, then go out on the field and do their own thing. He described a locker room divided, where the true leaders were being overshadowed by the loudest voices, not necessarily the most committed ones. Now, imagine you're watching this unfold in real time. Picture the reporters in that room, frantically, scribbling notes, phones buzzing with notifications as clips start getting shared. Picture the social media explosion that followed. But most importantly, picture Stephen A. Smith watching this from his office at ESPN, steam probably literally coming out of his ears, because when Stephen A. caught wind of this story, he went absolutely ballistic. And I mean ballistic. We're talking about a full-blown, no-holds-barred tirade that lasted nearly 15 minutes on first take. Stephen A. was pacing behind that desk like a caged lion, his voice getting higher and higher as he broke down what he saw as a complete breakdown in team unity and respect. "Are you kidding me right now?" Stephen A. shouted, his signature intensity on full display. This young man just threw his entire team under the bus. His own teammates, the people he's supposed to go to war with every single Saturday. The camera was shaking from the sheer force of his gestures, his co-hosts sitting there looking like they'd just witnessed a natural disaster. But Stephen A. wasn't done. Not even close. He went on to question everything. Shedeur's leadership, Coach Prime's handling of the situation, and what he called the complete deterioration of team chemistry in Boulder. He brought up examples from his own playing days, talked about the sacred code of the locker room, and basically painted this as the beginning of the end for Colorado's football program. Here's where it gets really interesting though, and this is the part that has everyone picking sides. Stephen A. didn't just criticize Shedeur. He went after the entire Sanders family approach to football. He questioned whether the prime-time mentality, the flashy confidence, the social media presence, was actually hurting team chemistry rather than helping it. He suggested that maybe, just maybe, all that individual spotlight was creating jealousy and division within the locker room. "When you're the coach's son," Stephen A. declared, pointing directly at the camera, "you don't get to call out your teammates publicly. You handle that internally. You earn respect through your play, not through press conferences." But hold up, because the story doesn't end there. Not by a long shot. See, what Stephen A. and a lot of other critics didn't immediately realize is that Shedeur's comments weren't made in a vacuum. They came after a particularly brutal loss where several veteran players had been caught on camera laughing and joking on the sideline while the team was down by 3 touchdowns. They came after reports of players skipping optional workouts and showing up late to team meetings. They came after whispers that some of the transfer portal additions were more interested in their nil deals than their on-field performance. Now the question becomes, was Shedeur right to call out these issues publicly? Or should he have kept it in-house, handled it the traditional way, the way players have been doing it for decades? And here's where the generational divide really shows up. Older players, former coaches, guys like Stephen A., who came up in a different era, they're horrified by what they see as a breach of locker room protocol. But younger fans, current players, people who grew up in the social media age, they're applauding Shedeur for his honesty and transparency. The plot thickens even more when you consider the bigger picture here. This isn't just about one team or one quarterback. This is about the changing landscape of college football. With the transfer portal, nil deals, and social media influence, the old rules don't necessarily apply anymore. Players have more power, more options, and more platforms to speak their minds. Traditional hierarchy and respect structures are being challenged every single day. And Coach Prime? Well, he's caught right in the middle of this storm. On one hand, he's got to support his son. That's family loyalty 101. On the other hand, he's got to maintain order within his team and show that he's not playing favorites just because Shedeur is his blood. The way he handles this situation could define his entire tenure at Colorado. But here's what really has me scratching my head, and I want you to think about this too. What if Shedeur's public call-out was actually a strategic move? What if this wasn't an emotional outburst, but a calculated attempt to force accountability within the team? Think about it. Sometimes you have to create a crisis to solve a crisis. Sometimes you have to make people uncomfortable to create change. Consider this scenario. Maybe Shedeur tried handling things the traditional way. Maybe he had those private conversations, those closed-door meetings, those one-on-one talks with problem players. And maybe nothing changed. Maybe the only way to create real accountability was to put everything out in the open, to create public pressure that would force people to either step up or step out. If that's the case, then Shedeur's move starts looking less like a betrayal and more like leadership. Not the kind of leadership we're used to seeing, but leadership nonetheless. The kind that prioritizes results over comfort, transparency over tradition, and team success over individual feelings. But Stephen A. Smith isn't buying it. Not for 1 second. In his follow-up segments, he's doubled down on his criticism, bringing in former players and coaches who all seem to agree that what Shedeur did was wrong. They're talking about the sanctity of the locker room, about earning respect through performance rather than press conferences, about the importance of handling family business behind closed doors. And you know what? They might be right. There's something to be said for the old-school approach, for handling conflicts internally, for maintaining a united front even when things are falling apart behind the scenes. There's wisdom in those traditions, respect built over decades of players who understood that what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room. But here's the counter-argument that's got me thinking, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. What if those old-school methods don't work anymore? What if the traditional approach to leadership and accountability is outdated in an era where everything is public, where players have more power than ever before, where social media and nil deals have completely changed the dynamics of college football? Maybe Shedeur's approach represents the future of team leadership. Maybe public accountability is the new normal. Maybe transparency, even when it's uncomfortable, is more effective than behind-the-scenes conversations that don't seem to be working. Or maybe Stephen A. is absolutely right, and Shedeur just made the biggest mistake of his young career. Maybe he's destroyed his credibility with teammates, created irreparable divisions within the locker room, and set himself up for failure both on and off the field. The truth is, we won't know the real impact of this situation for months, maybe even years. Will Colorado's team chemistry improve because of this public call-out? Will players step up and take more accountability? Will the fake leaders that Shedeur called out actually become real leaders? Or will this create a toxic environment where nobody trusts anybody, where players are walking on eggshells, where the locker room becomes a powder keg waiting to explode? And what about the bigger implications for college football? Are we witnessing the birth of a new era where players are more willing to speak truth to power, where transparency trumps tradition? Or are we seeing the beginning of the end for Team Unity as we know it? One thing's for sure, this story is far from over. Every game Colorado plays from here on out will be viewed through the lens of this controversy. Every interaction between Shedeur and his teammates will be analyzed and scrutinized. Every win will be seen as validation of his approach. Every loss as proof that he was wrong. So here's what I want to know from you. And I really want to hear your thoughts on this, because this is bigger than just football. Do you think Shedeur Sanders was right to call out his team's leadership publicly? Was this a necessary wake-up call that needed to happen, or was it a betrayal of everything that team sports represents? And what about Stephen A. Smith's reaction? Was he justified in going ballistic, or is he just stuck in the past, unable to accept that the game has changed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this is the kind of story that reveals how you really feel about leadership, accountability, and what it means to be a teammate in the modern era. Are you Team Shedeur or Team Stephen A? The answer might say more about you than you think.